When I think of Peterborough, I think of one of the Tory party's awkward squad. Am I being unfair?
I think that's I like that description. I've always been the rebel, from school days when there was this big debate of whether we should have a school council, and I was the only one out of 400 people who thought we should have it, but I still stood up and said we should have it. So yeah, I think I just like to stick up for what I think's right.
Is it just your personality? So you've always been like that, you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the way back, it's sort of the cause. If it doesn't matter what other people are saying, don't go with the crowd. Do what you think is right, and that's what I've tended to try and do.
You're a whip's nightmare, aren't you?
I hope so. That's entire. Whips should be, in my view, abolished. I'm not elected to do what someone else called a whip tells me to do. That's a ridiculous idea, isn't it? You're elected to Parliament to represent your constituents, not to do as some whip tells you. So I've never, 99% of the time, I guess, my view, my constituents' view and the party view are aligned. But if they're not, I'm going to put my constituents above my party.
Do the whips even bother talking to you ahead of a difficult vote anymore?
Yes. Sometimes I'm actually useful for them when they want me to force a division on the other side, so which we did recently. So yeah, no, I have no problem with the whips. I just think the idea that you get elected to Parliament, all that hard work to get there, for someone else to tell you which way to vote, it's a bit of a nonsense.
Let's talk about your childhood. Was it a happy childhood?
It was a happy childhood. I grew up council house, and my father was a council officer, and eventually we finished up in Harlow, and that was Labour controlled, strong Labour area, always going to be Labour in those days. And so it wasn't really too useful for him to have a 14-year-old who had just written a school project saying how wonderful the Conservatives are. There was 2 local papers, and they, Peter has his eye on number 10. And then we left. We moved to Southend-on-Sea when I was about 15. And that's really my home in many regards. And where Southend West, actually, the great David Ames. In fact, David Ames, who was terribly murdered just a little while ago, I was in the selection with David for that Southend West seat. And David went in before me. And you must know what it's like with a selection. You hardly get any reaction. David had them laughing, and they gave him a standing ovation. And then I had to go in afterwards.
That's awful.
But it's no. So Southend West was where I sort of flourished as politically. I was the youngest councillor in the country on Southend-on-Sea County Borough. Became, in fact, deputy chairman of the Southend West Conservative. So that's where I sort of moved forward.
Have you ever questioned your conservatism, your membership of the Conservative Party? That's a
different thing, isn't it? I've never questioned about being a Conservative. I sometimes wondered on occasions when the Conservative Party was being Conservative, and I can think of times under John Major where I had some doubts about that. But no, I've never doubted the principles that's behind the Conservative Party is what I believe in and what I try and put forward.
And when there was a couple of defections to UKIP during that period, you never contemplated?
No, I never. I was never even approached on that. But I do remember one Saturday when I was out knocking on doors with Tom Purslove, actually the MP for Corby, and we were campaigning as we always are on Saturday. Well, there's this news story that I was about to defect, about to appear from behind a curtain somewhere or other. But no, that never happened. And I know Nigel Farage very well because I worked with him on Grassroots Out, and I absolutely agree with him on Europe and many other things. But I've always believed in staying in the Conservative Party to get the Conservative Party to change. We did get it to change, and we did get Brexit.
What did that mean to you, getting Brexit?
It was the single biggest thing and most important thing politically to do. I mean, this goes back to David Cameron's days when a small group of us organised a rebellion where 83 Conservatives voted against a heavy 3-line whip, to vote for having a referendum. And I think that was the start of the process that got us the referendum. And then, of course, I formed with Tom Purslove our own campaign group to leave the EU called Grassroots Out, which in the end Nigel Farage and UKIP supported, and we had Kate Hoey from Labour supporting it, and Sammy Wilson, DUP. It was cross-party, real cross-party grassroots move. And we nearly became the official designated Leave group, which we would have done better if we'd been the official group.
Do you know, listening to you just prompted me to ask a question. Right, you've got to have one person round for tea. Nigel Farage or David Cameron? Who are you inviting round for tea?
Oh, well, it would certainly be more fun to have Nigel Farage, and I'd be more in. But I've had tea with Nigel Farage, and I think perhaps had tea once. I did have. I remember sitting in the tea room next to David Cameron when we were having tea, and he said to me, we're just chatting, and I said, "Oh, isn't it great? We've got this backbench business committee. We can put on substantive debates in the chamber. We can force votes." And he spluttered his tea out at that very moment. So I have had tea with David Cameron, but of the two, Nigel Farage.
Right, a personal question now. Your marriage broke down a few years ago. You don't have to talk about anything you feel uncomfortable with, but would you like to tell me about the impact of your marriage breakdown without upsetting anybody who may be involved?
No, well, my marriage broke down, and as many do actually in politics, but this was more also from the pressure that my family was under by a false allegation made by a council, which has now since been dissolved, and also someone was in court afterwards to deal with the issue. But that put a lot of pressure on Jenny and me, and we just grew apart. Now, Jenny is still my office manager, and we're still, in fact, I think we probably both agree we're better friends now that we're not living together. So it's actually worked out for the best. But I know many colleagues have had divorces through their time as MPs. It is very pressurised.
It's amazing that she still is your office manager. Because you rarely hear about marriage breakups that end amicably, but I can't think of a more amicable relationship than still wanting to work with somebody every day.
Oh no, we just grew out of love, really, and it was better for us not to live in the same house but be friends, and we're very, very good friends. And she, as I say, still runs the Wellingborough office. And
you're happily in a new relationship now?
Yes, a couple of years after that, I met Helen, who I think you know because she stood against you in Ashfield. And,
in 2017.
Yeah,
2017.
so she's doing really well, and she's now a councillor senior councillor in Northampton, and it's worked for us.
You seem very happy, even when I sort of ask you about things which may trouble some MPs, like rebelling, or you seem quite a cheery person. But your constituency office was graffitied, a matter of weeks, months ago. That's really not a nice thing to happen. What was the impact on you and your staff?
Well, the problem is the staff, and it's mainly Jenny, because she's the person in that office Monday to Friday. But it wasn't just that. I mean, we've had death threats. We've had a picture of my eldest son being executed on social media. We've had someone convicted for harassment. We've had a house attacked. These are sort of things that isn't limited to me. Of course, many MPs go through this, but it's not fair. Not fair. It shouldn't happen anyway. But it shouldn't happen to your family, because my family's got nothing to do with the way I vote, and it's outrageous and obscene. And social media has got a lot to do with it. I mean, by the time this is broadcast, I look on my social media and there'll be people saying all sorts of rude and nasty things. Peter,
so you got elected in 2005. Track for me in that, 17 years?
Yeah.
The levels of abuse as since you came into Parliament, and what you put that down to.
Going back then, it was really, really mild. I mean, you wouldn't get the stuff. But as social media developed, the idea that people can, call you a racist or want to kill your children or shout at you in the street, all those things now happen. And it's definitely, I mean, one of the things I would do is remove the fact that you can't tell who's someone who's tweeting something. You should be able to source that so you can take them to court for what they're saying. At the moment, they say awful things, which stirs other people up.
Yeah.
And I think we've all suffered from that, and it's not a good thing. And we've got to do we have to do something to make sure that people can't say things that are untrue and vicious just because they're hidden and you don't know who they are.
There's abuse and there's serious threats. Do you think any of the threats that have been made to you or your family have been ones that the police have needed to be involved in?
Well, obviously the one where the person was convicted, absolutely, convicted for harassment. That person threatened myself and my children. Mind you, I wouldn't say this never happened in the past, because in 1992 I stood against Neil Kinnock in Islay, and I got the best Conservative result ever there. I only lost by 36,000, and that actually is true. But Jenny told me one, and we had young children then, and Jenny said one day, "Look, Peter, I haven't told you, I've had death threats." Oh, God, you know. But I said, the reason I'm telling you, we now had death threats against the children as well. And great credit to Neil Kinnock and his office. We immediately rang the Labour office and said, this has happened. They put a statement out saying it was appalling, and it stopped overnight. But that was a rare incident, really rare. These ones now are serious, and the fact that, you can have your house attacked. Well, 3 times I had to dial 999 in my constituency surgeries in 1 year. 3 times. That can't be right.
Why?
Well, because of the threat level, and
somebody
scary.
was in that surgery,
Yeah.
which was alarming you.
Oh,
their
more
behaviour.
than alarming. And sometimes, I have staff with me from London who are, young people, and so we take a different approach to how we deal with surgeries, and there's additional security as well now, which helps.
Peter Bone, we're coming to the end of our chat. Didn't that fly?
It really did, and it's important that people realise, I think, that politicians are human beings, and the level of abuse that is thrown at us would never be acceptable in any other walk of life. So if we can do anything to stop that or reduce it, then we should.
I don't think there's been a more important time to reveal that, which is why part of the reason why we do these interviews, to demonstrate that very truth. Thank you, Peter Bone. Thank you.